In this video, I'm going to show you how we can configure EIGRP K values. You know that we can configure K values for tuning the metric parameters, but in most cases, it's better to use the default K values. First, let me to show you the default K values in router 1, for example. You know that here we configured R1, R2, and R3 with EIGRP. R1 and R2 are configured with the classic method and R3 configured with the named method. Let me to show you. Here in the router 1, you can use show IP protocols, okay? In the show IP protocols, you can see the metric weights or K values are K1 equal 1, K2 equal 0, K3 equal 1, K4 and K5 equal 0. And then in the router 2, let me to show you again show IP protocols. We have the similar condition, metric weights, K1 equal 1, K2 equal 0, K3 equal 1, K4 equal 0, and K5 equal 0. But in the router 3, show IP protocols can show us that we have K1, K2, K3, K4, K5, and K6 now. K6 is available when you configure the EIGRP with the named method, but until now, we don't use the K6. In future, we will use the K6, but now we can see it. K1 equal 1, K2 equal 0, K3 equal 1, K4 equal 0, K5 and K6 equal 0. Don't forget, when you configure K values with other values, you should configure it in all network. Why? Because this is one of the neighborship parameters. When you configure different values between R1 and R2, you won't have neighborship, EIGRP neighborship. Because of that, when you configure, for example, K1 1, K2 1, K3 1, K4 1, K5 1 in R1, you should configure exactly same conditions, same parameters on all other routers. Okay, let me to show you the text file. In this scenario, again, we have these steps. Step 1 and up to step 4 are similar to the previous scenario. Because of that, only we should do the step 5. Configure EIGRP K values with these parameters. K1 equals 0, K2 equals 0, K3 equal 1, K4 and K5 equal 0. The command is metric weights TOS always is 0. It is not supported now. K1 can be a value between 0 to 255, and also K2, K3, K4, and K5. We should configure only K3 as 1, and other parameters should be 0. Let me to show you. This is the router 1. In the router 1, configure terminal, router EIGRP 1, metric weights, and then TOS is 0, and then K1 is 0, K2 is 0, K3 is 1, K4 is 0, and K5 is 0. So easy. And now the neighborship will be actually down, because this is one of the neighborship parameters. Do show IP protocols can show us that here now the K1 is 0, K2 0, K3 1, K4 and K5 are 0. All right, here you can see the log K value mismatch. In the router 2, let me to configure it. Configure terminal, router EIGRP 1, metric weights, and then TOS is 0, K1 0, K2 0, K3 1, K4 0, K5 0. Now we will have neighborship between the router 1 and router 2, but the neighborship between the router 2 and router 3 will be actually tiered down, as you can see here. Now we have neighborship. Do show IP EIGRP neighbors. Okay, as you can see, now we have only neighborship with the router 1. In the router 3, also we can change it. Router EIGRP, for example, we configured router EIGRP lab, and after that address family IPv4 unicast AS1. And here you can configure metric weights. Again, TOS is 0, only TOS 0 supported, K1 is 0, and then K2 is 0, K3 is 1, and then K4 is 0, and after that K5 is 0. If you want, you can configure also the K6. Let me to configure K6 as 0, the default value. That's it. Now we will have neighborship between the router 2 and router 3 also, because the parameters are same. And show IP EIGRP neighbors and show IP protocols. can show us these values are changed: K10, K20, K31, K40, K50, K60. Don't forget, now the metric calculation will change. Here we have only K3. Because of that, only the delay will be used, delay of the interfaces will be used for metric calculation. Okay, show IP root, for example, can show us now we are using only the delay. These values are different from the default values that EIGRP uses. Now we know how we can configure EIGRP K values, but the best practice says that you don't need to configure EIGRP K values, and the default values are good, are acceptable in most cases.